The Galactic Concord had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Every species that traveled between worlds knew the laws. Every species followed them without question. But there was one rule that many considered strange and outdated, one restriction that seemed to make no sense at all. Sector 7G was forbidden. It sat on the outer edge of the galaxy, a small and unremarkable region of space that contained nothing special according to the star maps. Yet the ancient texts were clear about this place. No ship shall enter, no probe shall scan, no signal shall be sent. The old records called it the quarantine zone, and the warning had stood for 8,000 years. High Admiral of the Dominion did not believe in old warnings. He stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and stared at the forbidden coordinates with contempt in his cold eyes. His pale blue scales caught the light as he turned to face his war council. These were the finest military minds in the Dominion, leaders who had helped him conquer 43 species across 200 star systems. "Tell me," said, his deep voice filling the bridge, "why do we still obey this ridiculous restriction?" His officers shifted uncomfortably. Commander, his second in command, stepped forward. She was younger than most of the council, but her tactical mind had earned her place at side. "The conquered elders say there is a dangerous species in that region," answered carefully. "The architects themselves placed the warning before they disappeared. They said any contact with the inhabitants of Sector 7G would lead to destruction." Laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. The architects vanished 8,000 years ago. They left behind their gateway network and their warnings, and then they were gone. No one knows why. No one knows where. And we are supposed to follow their rules forever. He turned to the main display and brought up the sensor data his scouts had gathered from the edge of the Forbidden Zone. The council watched as images appeared showing a yellow star with 8 planets orbiting around it. The third planet from the star was covered in blue oceans and green land masses. Small satellites circled it. Primitive space stations floated nearby. A few basic vessels moved between the planet and its single moon. "This is what we are afraid of," said with disgust. "This is the great terror that keeps the entire galaxy away. A species that has never left their own solar system. A species with no faster-than-light capability. They cannot even reach the nearest star. They are primitives playing with toys." "But High Admiral," another officer spoke up, "the resources in Sector 7G are indeed valuable. Rich asteroid belts, gas giants perfect for fuel, yet every species in the Concord refuses to claim them. Does that not suggest the warning has merit?" Turned on the officer with anger in his eyes. "It suggests that every species in the Concord is a coward. The Dominion has never known defeat. Our plasma cannons can crack moons. Our invasion forces number in the billions. We have crushed species far more advanced than these humans. What could they possibly do to us?" The bridge fell silent. No one dared to argue with the High Admiral when his mind was made up. Transmitted his decision to the Galactic Concord that very day. His message was formal but clear. The Dominion rejected the quarantine restriction on Sector 7G. They would be entering the forbidden region to claim its resources for their empire. The primitive species on the third planet would be given a chance to surrender. If they refused, they would be conquered like all the others. The response came faster than anyone expected. Within hours, messages arrived from across the galaxy. The Concord Council sent an official warning. Then individual species began sending their own messages. The collective begged to reconsider. The Federation warned of grave consequences. The ancient elders, who rarely spoke to anyone, sent a single word that translated roughly to foolish. Every member of the Galactic Concord, all 217 spacefaring species, sent the same basic message. Turn back. Do not approach Earth. Do not make contact. Do not engage the humans under any circumstances. Commander brought the messages to personally. She found him in his private quarters, studying star maps and planning invasion routes. "High Admiral," she said, The response has been overwhelming. I have never seen the conquered so united. They are all telling us to stay away. Did not even look up from his maps. And this does not make you curious, Commander. Every species in the galaxy is terrified of one small world that cannot even achieve basic space travel. Does that not seem strange to you? It makes me cautious, admitted. The fear seems genuine. Whatever happened in the past, whatever the architects knew, it was enough to scare them into placing a permanent quarantine. The architects are dead or gone, replied. Their knowledge died with them. All that remains are warnings without explanation. I do not fear mysteries, Commander, I solve them. He finally looked up at her and saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. It was not just ambition, it was hunger. The Dominion had grown fast and strong under his leadership. They had taken world after world, species after species, but expansion was slowing. The easy conquests were finished. The remaining independent species were either too powerful or too protected by conquered treaties. Sector 7G represented something new. Fresh resources, a primitive species that could be enslaved, and a chance to prove that the Dominion feared nothing and no one. Assemble the fleet, ordered. 600 warships should be more than enough for one backward world. We leave in 3 days. Wanted to argue. Every instinct told her this was wrong, but she had sworn loyalty to the High Admiral, and officers did not question their commanders. As you command, she said, and left to carry out his orders. 3 days later, the invasion fleet departed for Sector 7G, 600 warships carrying millions of soldiers, enough firepower to destroy a dozen civilizations. They moved through the gateway network until they reached the edge of the Forbidden Zone. Then they activated their conventional drives and began the journey toward the yellow star that humans called the Sun. Behind them, the rest of the galaxy watched and waited. Some hoped they would succeed and prove the old fears groundless. Most expected to never hear from them again. A few, the oldest and simply shook their heads and mourned for the dead who did not yet know they were dead. They had been warned. They had chosen not to listen. Now they would learn why the architects had told the galaxy to stay away from Earth. Commander Daniel Hayes was drinking his 3rd cup of coffee when the alarm changed his life forever. He was working the night shift in the United Earth Defense Force Command Center, a massive facility buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. It was 3:47 in the morning, and until that moment, it had been a quiet night like any other. The sensor alert came from the early warning system near Saturn. Something had crossed into human space, something big. Daniel set down his coffee and walked to the main display. Lieutenant Lisa was already pulling up the data, her fingers moving fast across her console. She was young but talented, one of the best sensor operators in the fleet. "What do we have?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice calm. Lisa's face had gone pale. "Multiple contacts, sir. They came through some kind of portal near Saturn's orbit. I'm counting them now." She paused as the numbers climbed higher. 300 vessels. "No, 400, sir. The count is still rising." Daniel felt his heart beat faster, but he did not let it show. Humanity had known this day would come. They had been preparing for it since before Daniel was born, since before his parents were born. 200 years of preparation for the moment when the galaxy finally came to Earth. "How did we know?" Daniel had asked his instructors at the academy. "How did we know they would come?" The answer was always the same. In 2089, a human deep space probe had captured an alien device drifting near the edge of the solar system. It was a warning beacon left behind by beings who called themselves the Architects. The beacon contained a message and a database. The message was simple: stay hidden, stay quiet, never announce your presence to the galaxy. The database contained fragments of information about alien species, their technology, their politics, and their wars. Humanity had listened. They did not send signals into space. They did not try to contact anyone. Instead, they studied the database and learned everything they could. They captured more probes over the years, alien devices that wandered too close to human space. Each one taught them something new. Each one helped them prepare. "Wake up Admiral Cole," Daniel ordered, "and activate Protocol Omega." The words sent a wave of activity through the command center. Officers who had drilled for this moment their entire careers now put their training into action. Across Earth and throughout the solar system, humanity began to wake up. Hidden defense platforms in the asteroid belt powered up their weapons. Bases on the moon activated their shield generators. On Mars, shipyards that had never appeared on any alien scan began launching vessels. These ships had been built in secret, crewed by men and women who understood they might never return home. Admiral Cole arrived in the command center 20 minutes later. She was in her 60s, with silver hair and eyes that had seen humanity through 3 major crises. She had commanded the Defense Force for 15 years, and every decision she had made was aimed at this moment. "Report," she said simply. Daniel gave her the numbers. Over 600 alien vessels had now entered the solar system. They were approaching Earth at high speed. Their energy signatures matched the Dominion, one of the most aggressive species in the alien database. Nodded slowly. "So they finally decided to ignore the warnings. I wondered which species would be foolish enough to try." "Ma'am, their fleet is massive. Our visible forces are much smaller." Smiled. It was not a warm smile. "Commander Hayes, why do you think we have spent 2 centuries hiding? Why do you think we never announced ourselves to the galaxy?" "The warning said contact would lead to our destruction." "That was part of it," agreed. "But we also needed time. Time to study their technology. Time to understand how they think and fight. Time to build defenses they would never expect." She looked at the display showing the approaching fleet. "They see a primitive world with a few space stations and some small ships. They think this will be easy. They are about to learn how wrong they are." The fleet reached Earth orbit 6 hours later. High Admiral looked at the human defenses with amusement. A handful of stations, a few dozen small vessels, some satellites that probably could not even shoot back. "Send the surrender demand," he ordered. The message went out on all frequencies. "Primitive species of the 3rd planet, you are now subjects of the Dominion. Surrender your world and your resources. Resistance will result in extinction. You have 1 rotation of your planet to comply." In the command center, Cole listened to the message without expression. Around her, officers waited for her response. Some were afraid, others were angry. All of them understood that the next few hours would decide the fate of their species. "1 day to surrender," said thoughtfully. "How generous of them." "Ma'am," Daniel said, "what is our response?" Turned to the communications officer. "Send this message. We decline your offer. Leave now and we will permit your retreat. Stay and learn why this region was forbidden." The message was short and direct. It contained no fear and no pleading. It was the response of a species that had been preparing for this conversation for 200 years. High Admiral received the human response with shock, then anger, then cold fury. In all his years of conquest, no primitive species had ever dared to threaten the Dominion. They always begged. They always surrendered. They always understood that resistance was death. These humans seemed to understand nothing. "They are bluffing," declared. "They have nothing. Look at their ships. Look at their weapons. They are children playing with sticks while we bring cannons." Commander studied the sensor data with growing unease. Something did not feel right. The human response had been too confident, too calm. No species facing certain destruction spoke with such assurance unless they had something to back it up. "High Admiral," she said carefully, "perhaps we should probe their defenses first. Send a small force to test their response before committing the full fleet." Turned on her with contempt. "You want me to show caution to primitives, to creatures who cannot even leave their own star system? No, we will crush them utterly and completely. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who defy the Dominion. He gave the order that would seal his fate. All ships advance, destroy their orbital stations, show them the cost of defiance. The fleet moved toward Earth, 600 warships spreading out in attack formation. Their weapons powered up, their shields activated, their crews prepared for what they expected to be an easy slaughter. In the command center, Cole watched them come. Her face showed nothing, but her heart ached for the lives that were about to be lost. Not human lives, because the aliens did not know what was waiting for them in the dark spaces around Earth. All units said quietly, prepare to execute on my mark. The trap was set. Now it was time to spring it. The first wave of fighters screamed toward Earth. 300 small attack craft, each one piloted by a veteran of dozens of conquests. They flew in perfect formation, their weapons hot and ready. Behind them, the main fleet followed at a slower pace, preparing to witness another easy victory for the Dominion. The fighter pilots were confident. They had seen the human defenses on their sensors, a few orbital stations, some primitive satellites, nothing that could threaten warriors of the Dominion. Some of them were already joking about how quickly this battle would end. They never saw the mines. For 100 years, humanity had been seeding near-Earth space with dormant devices. These weapons floated silently in the void, too small to appear on standard scans, waiting for the moment they would be needed. When the fighters crossed into the activation zone, 10,000 minds woke up at once. They were not explosive weapons. Explosives would have been too simple, too easy to counter. Instead, each mine generated a focused electromagnetic pulse designed to exploit a specific weakness in shield technology. Humanity had discovered this weakness by studying captured probes for generations. They had tested it, they had perfected it, and now they used it. The pulse hit the fighters like an invisible wave. In an instant, 300 attack craft lost all power. Their engines died. Their weapons went silent. Their shields collapsed. The pilots screamed in confusion as their vessels tumbled through space, spinning helplessly toward Earth's atmosphere. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, High Admiral stared at his tactical display with disbelief. "What happened?" he demanded. "Report." His officers scrambled to understand. The fighters were not destroyed, but they were completely disabled. Something had knocked out their power systems in ways that should have been impossible. Technology was supposed to be immune to such attacks. Before anyone could answer, the second surprise revealed itself. The human vessels that they had dismissed as primitive suddenly opened hidden weapon ports along their hulls. They were not the weak ships they appeared to be. They were warships in disguise, built to look harmless until the moment they needed to be deadly. But they did not fire energy beams or plasma bolts. Instead, they launched kinetic projectiles. Solid chunks of tungsten accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed by magnetic rails hidden inside the ships. They had never encountered kinetic weapons at this scale. Their shields were designed to absorb and dissipate energy attacks. Against solid matter moving that fast, the shields barely helped at all. 12 cruisers shattered in the first volley. They simply came apart, their hulls torn open by impacts that released more energy than nuclear explosions. The crews died so quickly they did not even have time to understand what was happening. "Impossible," Commander breathed. She watched in horror as another volley launched as more cruisers died. Their technology was supposed to be inferior. Our scouts said they had no advanced weapons. "Your scouts only saw what we wanted them to see," a voice answered over the communication channel. Admiral Cole's face appeared on every display. She looked calm and confident, as if she were discussing weather instead of war. "High Admiral," she said, "you were warned to stay away from Earth. The Galactic Concord told you what would happen. You chose not to listen. Now you will understand why this region was forbidden." As she spoke, the asteroid belt behind the fleet came alive with light and motion. 200 human warships emerged from hiding places they had occupied for decades. These vessels had never appeared on any alien scan. They were built in secret shipyards buried inside asteroids, crewed by personnel who had trained their entire lives for this moment. And leading them was the flagship of the United Earth Defense Force. It was a dreadnought called the Defiance, and it was the size of a small moon. Its hull bristled with weapons that combined human innovation with reverse-engineered alien technology. It moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something so massive, its engines burning bright as it closed on the fleet. Finally understood the trap. The humans had let him bring his entire fleet into their space. They had let him position his ships exactly where they wanted them. And now they had him surrounded, his vessels caught between Earth's defenses and the hidden fleet from the asteroid belt. "All ships defensive formation," shouted. "Return fire, target their flagship." They fought back with everything they had. Their plasma cannons blazed, their missiles launched by the thousands. They were still a powerful force, 600 warships crewed by experienced warriors who had never known defeat. But every tactic they tried, the humans had anticipated. Every weapon they deployed, the humans had a counter prepared. When they concentrated their fire, human ships scattered and regrouped. When they tried to break through the encirclement, they found more weapons waiting in the darkness. It was as if humanity had spent centuries preparing for this exact enemy, this exact fleet, this exact battle. Because they had. The battle lasted 16 hours. 16 hours of fire and death, of ships exploding and crews dying, of desperate tactics and ruthless efficiency. They fought with courage, then desperation, then terror, and finally blind panic. They called for reinforcements that would never come. They tried to retreat through the portal they had used to enter, but human ships had already secured that position. When it was over, the fleet was broken. Not destroyed entirely, but crippled beyond any hope of fighting. Of the 600 warships that had entered human space, 412 were disabled and drifting. The rest were scattered wreckage. Human Marines boarded the Eternal Conquest 3 hours after the battle ended. They moved through the damaged corridors in sealed combat armor, their weapons ready but their discipline perfect. They did not kill unless they had to. They accepted surrenders. They treated the wounded. Major Taylor led the team that found High Admiral on his ruined bridge. He stood among the bodies of his officers, his scales dull and his eyes empty. His entire worldview had been destroyed along with his fleet. Removed her helmet. She had brown hair pulled back tight and eyes that showed no mercy but also no cruelty. "I am Major Taylor of the United Earth Defense Force," she said. "You and your crew are now prisoners of war. You will be treated according to the rules of conflict. Your wounded will receive medical care. Your dead will be honored." Looked at her with something like wonder. "You are not going to kill us." "We did not want to kill anyone," replied. "You came to our home, you threatened our people. You left us no choice but to defend ourselves, but we are not monsters, High Admiral. We take no pleasure in death." She gestured for her Marines to secure the prisoners. As they led away, she added one final thought. "Your empire is about to receive a message. I suggest they learn from your mistake." Message reached the Galactic Concord 14 days after the battle. It traveled through the gateway network at faster than light speed, spreading from system to system until every spacefaring species in the galaxy had received it. The message came from Sector 7G, from the forbidden region that everyone had been warned to avoid, from the species called humans. And it changed everything. The message began with simple words. "To all species of the Galactic Concord, we are humanity, inhabitants of the world you call Earth. For 200 years we have known of your existence. We chose isolation not out of fear but out of wisdom. We watched your politics. We studied your technology. We learned your strengths and your weaknesses. We prepared." Across the galaxy, leaders and commanders gathered around their displays to watch. The collective summoned an emergency council. The Federation put their military on high alert. The ancient elders who had not gathered in centuries came together to witness what would happen next. The message continued. The Dominion chose to ignore the warnings you all respected. They believed us primitive. They believed us weak. They sent 600 warships to conquer our world. They were wrong. The transmission switched to footage from the battle. Every destroyed ship, every failed tactic, every moment of defeat. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the most powerful military force in known space was torn apart by a species that had never left its own solar system. The images showed the captured fleet. 400 vessels, their weapons disabled, their crews taken prisoner. The footage showed the Defiance, the massive human dreadnought that had led the counterattack. It showed weapons that the galaxy had never seen before, technology that should have been impossible for such a young species. Then the message delivered its final warning. Let this serve as a reminder. We do not seek war, we do not seek conquest, we ask only to be left alone. But if any species chooses to test our resolve, know that we have spent 2 centuries preparing for you. We know your ships, we know your weapons, we know your tactics. Stay away from Earth's region. This is your final warning. Panic spread through the conquered like fire through dry grass. The Dominion had been one of the most feared forces in the galaxy. If humans could defeat them so completely, what hope did anyone else have? What other weapons were hidden in that forbidden region of space? Emergency councils convened on 100 worlds. Military leaders demanded immediate action. Politicians called for diplomacy. Scientists studied the battle footage, trying to understand how the humans had developed such advanced technology. Spies were sent to gather more information. Most of them never returned. On Earth, Admiral Cole met with Commander Daniel Hayes to discuss the aftermath. They sat in her office deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, surrounded by displays showing the galaxy's reaction to their message. They are afraid, Daniel observed. I can see it in their communications. They do not know what to do. Nodded slowly. Fear is a dangerous thing, Commander. It can make people cautious. It can also make them desperate. Some of them will decide that we must be destroyed before we become too powerful. They will convince themselves that they were simply unlucky, that a combined force could succeed where one empire failed. Can they? Was quiet for a long moment. Then she called up a holographic display that showed the entire solar system, every planet, every moon, every asteroid belt, and scattered throughout all of it, thousands of hidden installations that the rest of the galaxy knew nothing about. What we showed was 12% of our actual capability, said. 12%, Commander. We have been preparing for first contact since before my grandmother was born. Every generation added to our defenses. Every year brought new weapons, new ships, new strategies. She pointed to a network of devices positioned at key points throughout human space. Do you know what these are? Daniel studied the display, some kind of weapon system. The Omega Array, 2,000 devices, each one capable of generating an artificial gravitational singularity. Black holes, Commander, small ones that collapse quickly but powerful enough to crush any ship caught in their field. His voice was heavy with the weight of what she was describing. If any fleet approaches Earth with hostile intent, we can destroy them utterly. Every ship, every crew, everything. Daniel stared at the display with new understanding. We could destroy any of them, all of them. Yes, agreed. We could, but that is not who we want to be. We showed restraint against we captured rather than killed. We disabled rather than destroyed. We wanted to prove that humanity is not a threat to those who leave us in peace. She turned off the display and looked at Daniel with tired eyes. Our message was not a boast. It was an olive branch wrapped in a warning. We are offering the galaxy a choice. Leave us alone and we can coexist. Attack us and face destruction. Do you think they will listen? Sighed, some will, some will not. There are always those who believe they can succeed where others have failed. There are always those who think power gives them the right to take what they want. Over the following months, the galaxy tried to decide what to do about humanity. Diplomats sent careful messages asking for talks. Spies tried to penetrate human space. Military planners studied the battle footage over and over, looking for weaknesses that did not exist. And slowly, almost inevitably, a coalition began to form. 7 species who believed that humanity posed a threat that must be eliminated. 7 species who convinced themselves that the defeat was a fluke that could not be repeated. They gathered in secret, planning what they called the cleansing of Sector 7G. Learned of the coalition through intercepted communications. She read their plans with a heavy heart. Humanity had never wanted this. They had wanted only to be left alone, to develop in peace, to find their own path among the stars. Send them a message, she ordered. Tell them we know what they are planning. Tell them we will give them every opportunity to turn back. Tell them what will happen if they do not. 17 separate warnings were sent to the coalition. 17 messages explaining exactly what awaited them if they continued. Humanity demonstrated the Omega Array on asteroids, turning solid rock into nothing in an instant. They showed the coalition leaders what would happen to their fleets. The coalition laughed and continued their preparations. They did not believe the warnings. They did not understand what they were facing. And so the second great test of humanity was set in motion. A test that would force them to use the terrible weapons they had built, weapons they had hoped would never be needed. Cole watched the coalition fleet assemble through long-range sensors. 4,000 warships from 7 species, the largest armada in galactic history. They were coming to destroy Earth. They were coming to end the human threat forever. They had no idea what they were walking into. 3 years had passed since the defeat. 3 years of tension and fear and uncertain peace. The galaxy had changed during that time, and humanity had changed with it, but not in the ways anyone had hoped. The coalition fleet launched its attack on a cold morning in January. 4,000 warships from 7 species, carrying 12 million crew members and enough firepower to destroy a dozen worlds. They moved through the gateway network with confidence, convinced that their numbers would overwhelm any defense. They had failed because they were arrogant and alone. The coalition would succeed because they were united and prepared. They entered human space 3 days before they expected to reach Earth. Admiral Cole tracked their approach on her displays, watching the massive fleet draw closer to the invisible line that marked the edge of the Omega Array's range. She had done everything possible to prevent this moment. She had sent warnings. She had offered negotiations. She had demonstrated exactly what would happen if the coalition continued. They had not listened. They had called her bluff. They believed that no species would actually use such terrible weapons, that humanity was making empty threats to protect itself. They were wrong. Admiral Daniel Hayes said quietly, "The coalition fleet has crossed the activation threshold. Omega Array is ready to fire on your command." Closed her eyes for a moment. She thought about the 12 million beings on those ships, fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, people with hopes and dreams and families waiting for them at home, people who were about to die because their leaders had made a terrible mistake. "Send one final message," she ordered. "Tell them this is their last chance. Turn back now or face destruction. No more warnings after this." The message went out. The coalition fleet continued its advance without slowing. Their commanders believed it was another bluff. 8 minutes later, the Omega Array activated. 2,000 devices generated 2,000 gravitational singularities. Tiny black holes appeared throughout the coalition fleet, each one lasting only a fraction of a second, but pulling everything nearby into crushing oblivion. Ships that had traveled across the galaxy were compressed into points smaller than atoms. 12 million beings died so quickly that most of them never knew what had happened. In 8 minutes, the largest armada in galactic history ceased to exist. not defeated, not damaged, simply gone, erased from the universe as if they had never been. The galaxy received the news with horror. 7 species had lost their entire military forces in an instant. 7 governments collapsed in the aftermath, unable to explain to their people how such a disaster had occurred. The galactic concord, which had governed the stars for 12,000 years, dissolved completely. No one trusted anyone anymore. No one believed that the old rules still applied. On Earth, Cole resigned her commission the day after the battle. She could not bear the weight of what she had done, even though she knew it had been necessary. Daniel Hayes took her place as Admiral of the Defense Force, inheriting a role he had never wanted and a burden that would haunt him forever. In the chaos that followed, humanity made a choice. They could have used their power to conquer the galaxy. With the Omega Array and their hidden fleets, no one could have stopped them. They could have built an empire greater than any that had existed before. Instead, they chose a different path. Ambassador Brooks, a former diplomat who had spent his career working for peace, was sent to address what remained of the galactic community. He stood before representatives of 100 species, beings who had every reason to hate and fear humanity, and spoke words that would define a new era. Humanity never wanted to be feared, he said. His voice was calm and sincere. We wanted only to be left in peace, to develop at our own pace, to find our place in the universe without being conquered or enslaved. When we discovered that peace was impossible, we did what our ancestors have always done. We adapted, we prepared, we survived. He paused and looked around the assembly hall. He saw fear in some faces, anger in others, but also hope in a few, hope that something better might emerge from this terrible situation. The coalition fleet could have turned back at any moment. We gave them every opportunity. We showed them exactly what awaited them. They chose their fate, spread his hands in a gesture of openness. We are not monsters. We take no joy in what happened, but we will not apologize for defending our home and our people. He explained what humanity was offering. They would share their technology with any species that wanted it. They would participate in trade and diplomacy. They would help defend against external threats. In return, the galaxy would respect human borders and remember the lesson that had been taught. Humanity is not your enemy, concluded. But if you force us to be, we will be the last enemy you ever face. The choice is yours. One by one, the representatives of 100 species signaled their acceptance. They had no other option. The old order was gone, and humanity was offering a new one that at least promised peace. In an observation gallery above the assembly hall, Admiral Daniel Hayes watched the proceedings with mixed feelings. Captain Monica, his aide and friend, stood beside him. "We won," she said quietly. "We actually won." Daniel shook his head. "We survived. That is not the same thing." He watched the diplomats below, the careful handshakes and formal agreements. 12 million beings died because their leaders were too proud to listen. They lost everything because one admiral was too arrogant to heed a warning, and we became exactly what they feared, the monster in the dark. The reason no one goes to Sector 7G. Do you regret it? Daniel thought about the question for a long time. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the universe is a place where species must choose between being predators or prey. But I do not regret that humanity survived. I do not regret that my children will grow up free. He straightened his uniform and turned away from the window. The architects knew what they were doing when they quarantined us. They saw our potential for good and for terrible things. They gave us time to develop, hoping we would become something better than the empires around us. Did we? Monica asked. Daniel considered the question as he walked toward the door. Below them, Ambassador Brooks was shaking hands with alien diplomats. A new era was beginning. Humanity had emerged from isolation, transformed by preparation and blood and terrible necessity. I do not know, Daniel admitted, but we have time to find out now, time to grow, time to change, time to prove that being dangerous does not mean we have to be cruel. He paused at the door and looked back at the assembly one final time. That is all we ever really wanted, time to become whatever we are meant to be. The galaxy had been warned to stay away from Earth's region. The had ignored that warning. The Coalition had ignored it too. Both had paid the ultimate price for their arrogance. Now humanity stood among the stars, no longer hidden, no longer afraid. They had proven that they would do whatever was necessary to survive. They had also proven that they preferred peace to war, mercy to cruelty, cooperation to conquest. The future was uncertain. Old enemies still lurked in the darkness. New threats would arise in time, but humanity would face them as they had faced everything else, with patience, with preparation, with the quiet determination of a species that had learned the hardest lesson the universe could teach. Survival was not enough. They wanted to be worthy of surviving. And now they had the chance to prove it.